Hello, my darling pop stars, my beautiful ladies, and my handsome gentlemen. I just wanted to jump in and say, yep, I'm back. Now, I don't know if I'm fully back yet, but I am definitely back for Heart Signal 5. First of all, thank you to everyone who commented on my last video asking me to cover the show. I also really appreciate all the TikTok and Instagram DMs. You guys were persistent and honestly, you won. Yay! So let's talk about Heart Signal. When I first started watching this season, I wasn't impressed at all. Every episode felt the same. I'd sit down to watch, and it was just boring. In fact, I was skipping through so much of it that I wasn't even paying full attention. But then I watched episode 9, and wow. Episode 9 was the first episode I watched from beginning to end without skipping a single scene. It was that good. Suddenly, things started clicking. The emotions felt stronger, the relationships became more interesting, and for the first time this season, I found myself genuinely invested. I was sitting there thinking, okay, now we're getting somewhere. So I decided it was finally time for me to come out of retirement and start talking about Heart Signal 5. There is also some drama brewing in the house, and that I definitely want to discuss. But we'll save that for a future video because I have a lot to say about it. For today, I want to keep things simple. I want to talk about my first impressions of the cast, how I felt when I started the show, who stood out to me immediately, and of course, my early predictions for the final couples. Then, in the next video, we'll start breaking down the actual episodes, the relationships, the signals, the mixed messages, and all the chaos properly. So, grab your snacks, get comfortable, and let's get into Heart Signal 5. Kim Minju was the first person who caught my attention. The moment she walked in, she immediately reminded me of Jimin from Heart Signal 4. I was sitting there thinking, wait, is this Jimin's sister? So naturally, I went online to investigate. I couldn't find any official confirmation, but apparently, I'm not the only one who noticed the resemblance. A lot of viewers have been making the same connection. Both Minju and Jimin were born in 2000. They share the same last name, and honestly, they look so alike that I started wondering if they were secretly twins or something. Again, that's just fan speculation. As far as I know, there's been no official confirmation that Heart Signal 5's Kim Minju is related to Heart Signal 4's Kim Jimin. But what really caught my attention wasn't her appearance. It was the first thing she said. She mentioned that her sister warned her to be careful about joining the show because she could end up getting really hurt. But Minju basically said she didn't care. She was excited and wanted to experience it for herself. And honestly, so far, I think she's been one of the most honest people in the house when it comes to her feelings. Her personality is bright, funny, and very easy to like. Now, her choices? Absolutely irritating. Very, very irritating. But we're not getting into that today. Like I said, this video is strictly about first impressions. We'll save the frustration for another episode. Now let's talk about the first guy to enter the house, Yeol. First of all, the man is clearly handsome. But there's something about me when watching these shows. Whenever they say things like, a guy has a dragon face, or he has a puppy face, I've never understood. Every single time, I've always been like, what are you people seeing? I genuinely don't get it. However, when Minju said Yeol looked like a potato, suddenly everything clicked. I saw it immediately. I could see the shape. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. What made the moment even funnier was when Minju admitted that he was so handsome she could barely look at him. She said she felt intimidated and that she usually doesn't go for extremely handsome guys. I was dying. Her commentary throughout those early episodes was honestly one of the reasons I liked her so much. Because if we're being honest, Yeol didn't give us much in the beginning. He was very quiet and reserved. But there was one moment that immediately caught my attention, and that was when the third contestant entered the house, Jong Yuri. When Minju walked in, Yeol barely reacted. He didn't seem nervous, didn't seem overly interested, and didn't go out of his way to impress her. But the second Gyuri entered, my guy was finished. The look on his face said everything. You could literally see the awe in his eyes. Gyuri walked in with her suitcase, looking confident, stylish, and honestly like somebody with a strong, extroverted personality. Which is why I was a little confused later when she turned out to be one of the shyest people in the house. But anyway, the moment Gyuri entered, Yeol suddenly became very thirsty. This man started reaching for water like he'd just crossed a desert. Bro was hydrating for survival. And honestly, I get it, Yeol. She's a beautiful woman. When Gyuri entered, Yeol completely malfunctioned. Suddenly, this man was sweating. He started licking his lips, wiping his face. His ears turned so red they looked like they were about to explode. And do you know exactly when all of this happened? The moment Gyuri took off her coat. Right there, right then, immediately. Based on that first interaction alone, my very first prediction was that these two would end up being each other's final choice. Now remember, this is just for fun. These predictions are based purely on first impressions. At this point, I hadn't seen enough of the season to make any serious conclusions. But the way Yeol reacted to Gyuri reminded me so much of the way Woojin looked at Jiwon when she first entered the house on Heart Pairing. That look where somebody is trying to act normal, but their soul has already left their body? I'm laughing my small ass off. That's why I convinced myself that Yeol and Gyuri might actually be each other's endgame. And let's not forget, Woojin and Jiwon are still going strong today. Of course, anything can happen. Reality dating shows are professional dream killers. But I'll be here watching. The funniest part was that Yeol kept staring at Gyuri, while Gyuri basically said he wasn't even her usual type. But she noticed Yeol was looking at her intensely. I bet her heart fluttered. She also mentioned that she tends to prefer flashier men. Meanwhile, my guy was over there fighting for his life. Then came the moment that nearly took me out. Yeol started putting something on his lips while staring at Gyuri. I don't know why that scene was so intense, but I almost fainted. Even Gyuri seemed to lose her composure for a second. The chemistry was chemistrying. Now let's talk about Songmin. My first impression of him was that he talked. A lot. Like, a lot. And immediately I became worried. Because people like Songmin often get friend-zoned on these dating shows. They're funny, they're approachable, they're easy to talk to, but sometimes they end up becoming everybody's best friend instead of anybody's boyfriend. However, Minju seemed interested in him almost immediately, so my concern and worries about his love line decreased quite a bit. Then we have Kim So-won. In my opinion, he was the most handsome man in the house. His entrance made a strong impression because he wasn't trying too hard. He wasn't showing off. He wasn't falling over himself trying to impress the women. He just walked in, acted like himself, and somehow came across as very masculine and confident. There was also something slightly awkward about him, but not in a bad way. It actually made him feel more genuine. At that moment, I thought he had one of the strongest entrances of the entire cast. But that image didn't last very long. In fact, before the first day was even over, that powerful first impression had already started crumbling. And not just in my eyes. It seemed like it was disappearing in the ladies' eyes too. But before we get into that, let's talk about the final participant's entrance. Then came Kang Yoo-jong. When she first entered the house, she honestly looked like your average girl next door. But then she took off that, I just can't, guys. Like, when she took off that grandma coat she had on, sat down, and the camera zoomed in on her face, my jaw was on the floor. OMG. I was like, what the heck? How is she this pretty? Like, seriously? Even if she's had work done, surgery can't create this kind of beauty. This is the kind of face that makes the camera operator forget they're supposed to be working. Immediately, you could tell that Songmin and So-won were interested in her, but Woo Yeol? My guy was unbothered. No fidgeting, no nervousness, no staring or paying much attention to her. Like, nothing. No visible signs of attraction whatsoever. Based on what the show gave us, he seemed completely unbothered by her arrival. Then came the 10-minute one-on-one conversations, and this is where So-won started fumbling the bag. Gyuri chose So-won first because he fit her ideal type the most. However, there was a problem. So-won was already focused on Yoo-jung. The moment Gyuri sat down, he practically speed-ran that conversation. As soon as she arrived, he lit the candle. Their conversation ends once the candle they lit up completely melts. At first, I thought he was just trying to get rid of her because he couldn't wait to talk to Yoo-jung. Later, I gave him the benefit of the doubt and wondered if maybe he was simply trying to strictly follow the rules. But then, my guy didn't even try to put in any effort. This was his first fork-up, but I was like, okay, it could be redeemable. But then he did the exact same thing with Minju, and that's when I knew we had a problem. The conversation was so awkward that Minju joked she wanted to blow out the candle herself and run away. I was crying. I was like, hell no! Why are you blowing up your chances to show your charm? I remember sitting there thinking, my guy, why are you sabotaging yourself on day one? You have 10 minutes to show your personality, build rapport, and create curiosity. Instead, you're escorting people out like you're closing a convenience store. At one point, he basically told Gyuri, the candle is done burning, meaning, thank you for visiting, please proceed to the nearest exit. Then came Yoo-jung. Suddenly, this man transformed. He became talkative, attentive, engaged, interested, talking about her scar. And that's when I started getting worried, because he was putting all of his eggs into one basket on day one. Huge mistake. But somehow it got even worse. Later that evening, Yoo-jung was preparing dinner with her assigned partner Woo Yeol when So-won and Songmin walked into the kitchen, wanting to help. Songmin was even okay with his actions, but So-won put on an apron. Bro, it wasn't even his time to cook. Gosh, I was laughing my ass off. And let me tell you something. This man did not even attempt to hide his crush. Not even a little bit. When Woo Yeol and Yoo-jung started cooking together, So-won looked like somebody who had accidentally subscribed to emotional pain. He kept finding reasons to hover around them, trying to join the conversation, trying to insert himself into every moment. Everybody in that house could tell he liked Yoo-jung. I felt bad for Gyuri and Minju. At this point, they looked like leftovers in that kitchen. I'm not saying they are, just using that as a figure of speech to describe how horrendous the situation looked. Never have I experienced the feeling I felt while watching that scene in all heart signal history. At that point, I started thinking, there is no way this strategy is going to work, because first impressions matter on dating shows, and his first impression was quickly becoming guy who only notices one woman. Then came the dinner from hell. Everybody knew that food was terrible. The cast knew, the viewers knew, the ancestors knew. But So-won, OMG. My brother was eating that meal like it was prepared by a Michelin star chef. Every bite looked like the greatest culinary experience of his life. I almost fell out of my chair. It was so obvious that he liked her. And personally, my interpretation at the time was that he had already damaged his chances with every other woman in the original cast. If Yoo-jung wasn't interested in him, I thought he was finished. Like, he is so finished. Unless, of course, if he's not here for love, then okay. By the end of day one, That strong, confident first impression he made during his entrance had completely disappeared. By the end of episode 1, I felt like his only hope of leaving this show in a couple with someone is if a game changer comes in. A game changer who is unaware about this insane first-day havoc. And judging by the text messages that night, it seems his powerful entrance that day totally disappeared for the ladies too. Then that moment where he kept scraping the spaghetti bowl had me in stitches. I almost died laughing, y'all. Now let's talk about Yeol. Because while So-won was busy self-destructing, Yeol was quietly building connections. Gyuri, who initially wasn't interested in him at all, completely changed her opinion after their one-on-one conversation. And honestly, I understood why. This man was practically vibrating with excitement while talking to her. He was nervous, fidgety, smiling, fully invested. Then he immediately arranged for them to commute together the next day. My guy was moving fast. By this point, Gyuri's attention had completely shifted away from So-won. And after that painful conversation with him, she probably felt relieved to finally talk to someone who felt like a real man and seemed genuinely interested. Then we have Yoo-jung and Sung-min. I hate to say it, but their conversation was flat. Like extremely flat. Sung-min has a tendency to talk like a friend, and while that's great in real life, on dating shows it can sometimes kill romantic tension. I didn't feel much chemistry between them at all. Could that change later? Absolutely. But based purely on episode 1, I wasn't seeing it. Ironically, I felt more chemistry between Sung-min and Minju. I think because Sung-min wasn't overwhelmingly attracted to Minju at first sight, he actually seemed calmer around her. He wasn't too talkative, so he looked more grounded and more serious. And somehow that made him more attractive. The conversation felt natural. The chemistry felt real. Minju clearly wanted to get to know him more. But the problem is that Sung-min seemed far more interested in Yoo-jung. And this is where I started getting nervous. Because my biggest fear after episode 1 was that Minju would end up chasing somebody who wasn't choosing her back. As someone who has now watched up to episode 9, let's just say my concerns were not exactly relieved. In fact, Minju has somehow managed to frustrate me even more than Jimin did in season 4. Her personality is a solid 10 out of 10, absolutely lovable. But her romantic decisions? I have questions, many questions.
Sometimes I want to climb through the television screen, grab her ass out, and give her a solid knock on the head, and ask, "What exactly are we doing here, Minju? Please explain the strategy."
Now back to Yeol and Yoo-jung. Even though Yeol's first attraction seemed to be Gyuri, I think his connection with Yoo-jung began during their one-on-one conversation. They started laughing together over things that honestly weren't even that funny. And somehow I found myself smiling too. I didn't necessarily feel romantic chemistry between them, but I did feel a connection. A very natural connection. And from that moment, it felt like Yoo-jung was already falling for him. She claimed she built a wall because he looked like a player. But honest, I didn't see her biting any walls. That was her delusion speaking. I saw her walls collapsing in real time, LOL. Then they cooked the dinner from hell together, went shopping together, spent more time together, and naturally that connection kept growing. I also think Yeol noticed that both Sung-min and So-won were interested in Yoo-jung, and whether consciously or subconsciously, that may have increased his own interest. Competition has a funny way of doing that. And this isn't uncommon on these shows, for a guy to develop feelings for a girl because she is the most popular. Now, when the texts were finally sent that night, Yeol and Yoo-jung chose each other, and just like that, they became the first connection that really stood out to me. So those were my first impressions after episode 1. And if I had to predict the final couples based solely on episode 1, my strongest prediction was Yeol and Gyuri because of how much he liked her after she came in. That was the only pairing I felt genuinely confident about based on episode 1. As for the rest, Minju and Songmin seemed to have enough chemistry that I could at least imagine the possibility. So for the sake of first impressions, I'd put them down as a potential endgame pairing too. But that's it. What about you guys? What were your first impressions of episode 1? Did I miss anything important? Did you see things differently? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!
Thanks for watching. If this video got you thinking, hit like, drop your thoughts in the comments, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.